The most common component review request from our viewers over the past few months has been the RX 5700 XT Red Devil by Powercolor. Powercolor was never able to get them in stock to send us one, but we finally sniped one when it popped up on Amazon. So now we know what you all feel like with the 5700 XT series. This will likely be the last 5700 XT series card we review unless something major comes out or a thick 3. So we'll finally have a fairly full picture of how the entire stack aligns compared to the much praised 5700 XT Red Devil from Powercolor. The Red Devil has easily been the most universally recommended in comment threads and for review, and so we'll be benchmarking it for thermals, acoustics, and build quality in today's review. Before that, this video is brought to you by Thermal Grizzly's Conductonaut Liquid Metal. Conductonaut is what we've used in all of our liquid metal and delid thermal tests, capable of dropping CPU thermals significantly when replacing the stock thermal interface. Lower CPU thermals don't just allow better overclocks, but also lower noise levels because the transfer efficiency is increased. The mix of gallium and indium makes for a thermal conductivity of 73 watts per meter Kelvin, outclassing traditional pastes significantly. Learn more at the link in the description below. The Red Devil's a really pretty simple card in terms of design. It doesn't do anything special, which is fine. As long as it's cool, I mean, it's a pretty simple concept, really. Air and metal. Don't really need to get that fancy with it as long as the basics are covered, which they've done, and we'll be talking about that today. But the card for us was $440. We bought it retail, and at $440, it's priced pretty much neck and neck with the Sapphire Nitro OC card that we reviewed previously. Parts of it are still on this table, and not distant from things like the XFX Thick, not too distant, actually pretty much the same as the MSI Gaming X. So there's a lot of cards in this price category, plus or minus about 10 bucks, where your choices are many. And that makes picking a bit more difficult because you're faced with more choices. At the lower end of the 5700 XT spectrum, we have easy choices like the Gigabyte Gaming OC or the Sapphire Pulse. Either one of those at the $420-ish price point, we're good with. We liked how both those performed and have really no issues at all recommending those for a 5700 XT card, period. But if you want something higher end, you might be looking at something like the Red Devil. The Red Devil got a lot of benchmarking from us. We'll be going through thermal and acoustic numbers, noise normalized, all that stuff. We also did a quick teardown, which will be included in this piece, so it's all in one here. And as a side note, the disassembly of the card's really straightforward. Powercolor still has the really sort of shameful warranty void of removed stickers on their screws. Again, the sticker's still on there, so you can argue that with their RMA department. The sticker didn't come off, and it doesn't say warranty void if punctured with a screwdriver. So it doesn't count as far as we're concerned. But that's really the most shameful thing they've done. Otherwise, disassembly is really easy with this card. 6 screws, it's 4 for going straight into the cooler, as always, and then 2 additional screws off to the side. If you want to get things like the base plate off, that's not difficult either. It's another set of maybe 2, 4, 6, 8 to 10 screws, depending on how you count them. So yeah, really not difficult. Let's get into the thermals, the acoustics, the frequency, and we'll talk about if it's actually worth it. We'll start with noise normalized thermals, as this gives us the best look at cooler efficiency when all matched to the same noise level. Allowing coolers to run how they want to is a different task coming up later, but also means that anyone who brute forces high fan RPMs and noise can win the charts. That's why we segment them. Results will mostly scale hierarchically. So if you have a 40 dBA noise level, the hierarchy will retain mostly rank at, say, 44 dBA or other levels. 40 dBA is equal to or higher than what most coolers run stock, with most within 1 to 3 dBA of this measurement point. The Red Devil 180 watt silent configuration runs the coolest. This isn't a huge feat, seeing as the power budget is also reduced. And so comes the next point. Power must also be monitored. We can't really normalize it in any realistic way. You can set power play tables, you can build custom VBIOSes, but it's just, that's asking a lot. So at 180 watts, this cooler is most comparable to reference at 40 dBA, a massive improvement, obviously, or perhaps the Sapphire Pulse at 194 watts or the Taichi X at 190 watts. Even against the Taichi X, the closest at 79 degrees junction, the Red Devil maintains enough of a lead that even a 10 watt reduction to the Taichi won't equalize the two. With the OCV BIOS, the Red Devil maintains 220 watts under this benchmark, allowing it to run better than the Nitro Plus by about 2 to 3 degrees Celsius junction temperature. The edge temperatures are also close here. The Taichi X at 230 watts still runs the hottest of the partner cards, at 92 degrees junction against the high power consumption V-BIOS, and the thick at 210 watts runs 90 degrees junction. This Red Devil and the Nitro Plus remain the most efficient cooler designs, with the Gigabyte Gaming OC and the Sapphire Pulse following up in the more reasonably priced category. GDDR6 and VRM MOS thermals are next. As we said in the last video of 5700 XTs, VRM MOS temperatures aren't all that relevant here, aside from ensuring that nothing is horribly wrong, which happens sometimes. It doesn't matter if one MOSFET is cooler than the other in terms of performance, at least not until you're at or above 125 degrees, but it does matter from a purely technical standpoint of cooler design. Memory is far more important, as the cards toward the bottom of this chart, like Reference, the Evoke, and the Thick, can all hit maximum memory temperatures of 105C+ when installed in a case with a higher ambient than our testing environment. The Powercolor Red Devil 180-watt Silent V BIOS ends up in second place, behind the 20-watt higher Sapphire Nitro Plus when it comes to GDDR6 cooling. And as a reminder, ambient is controlled in our environment second to second. We monitor it every second, look at the data at the end, make sure there's no variance. We stick to about 21 degrees Celsius, so that gives you a baseline for where we are. Both here are so cool that it's irrelevant who has the lead between the Nitro Plus and the Red Devil. So when it comes to GDDR6 cooling, it's just, as long as you're well under spec, it's fine. Memory doesn't boost based on GDDR6 thermals. It's not like a GPU. That said, from a purely technical standpoint, the Nitro Plus is the superior design for G6 cooling here, even with the 20-watt higher power budget, which, although that doesn't go into the memory, it does leach out into the PCB surrounding the GPU and raise temperatures overall of the immediate area. The Red Devil at 220 watts ends up again behind the Nitro Plus, retaining the scaling as the other test. With the two power budgets now equalized, we can see that the Nitro Plus keeps about a 2-degree gap in G6 thermals for the hottest module. In reality, both cards are performing well, and it doesn't particularly matter which of the two you buy when it comes to memory or MOS thermals. It's time to take this thing apart to see what it looks like underneath, what creates these results. Then we'll get into the auto results after this section. The cooler is fairly straightforward, with most of its performance derived the old-fashioned way. A lot of fans and a lot of metal. There's nothing wrong with that if it works well. The fin to heatsink has standard fin pitch and density, and no fancy design elements. But if it works, then that's all that really matters here. Removing the heatsink reveals a separate aluminum cold plate for the contacting section of the memory, including some of the plus-shaped Phillips indents on the memory thermal pad. These screws help distribute the force evenly across the aluminum plate, but they aren't the only thing connecting the memory plate to the heatsink. One of our concerns when we see designs like this is that some of the coolers only use the screws to hold the plates together with no real interface to transfer heat from one to the other. But the Red Devil takes the more traditional and better approach of welding the plate to the heatsink fins or soldering it, and then adding screws for additional support. We're fine with this assembly. There's no direct conduction from the inductors to the heatsink, unlike the last card that we tore apart, but this also isn't important. The inductors are just copper coils inside of a shell, and they're capable of running at the highest temperatures out of every other component on this card. It's nice to see, but it also doesn't accomplish anything to sync them other than increasing the temperature of everything else because you're soaking more into the cooler. Thermal paste is well spread on the card, and the heatsink has basically a perfect amount here. We have completely even spread of compound across the die and the outer edges, indicating even mounting pressure, something that, again, as discussed last time, you learn when working with Allen 2-pots. You can identify a good mount, a bad mount. This is a very good one. So as this was purchased retail, we also have some additional assurance in knowing that it resembles what the consumers will buy. There's full contact of about 3 heat pipes to the GPU, with another half a heat pipe contact at the outer edges. Powercolor is using 6mm heat pipes, 5 of them, and this is all pretty standard sizing for this generation. It's got some wide gaps between the heat pipes and the contact plate. If you're really looking under the hood, you can see the spacing between them is not as filled in as it could be. So this area has potential for infill with contacting materials and improvement, but as we saw in the performance, it doesn't matter that much. It's already doing fine. And finally, the backplate of this card has no functional purpose. There aren't any thermal pads connecting the backplate to the memory or the rear of the GPU or the VRM. It's purely for looks. This is an area where we would actually like to see Powercolor improve in the future and add some thermal pads. G6, as you've heard us say in all of these, is flip chip. It's pretty close to the back of the PCB relative to other components, and putting a thermal pad back there will help, and might as well leverage the extra metal if you have it. Otherwise, just wasteful, really. Auto thermals are tricky to benchmark with this card. The Powercolor Red Devil behaves differently in FurMark than it does in 3D Mark in games, which isn't true for most of the other cards that we've looked at, except for one of them. for the 5700 series. So this means that unscrupulous testing in just one application wouldn't give us a proper look at how the card performs. Testing only in FurMark would mean a more aggressive fan curve with this specific card, which doesn't translate to the VBIOS profile for other applications. So it would paint the Red Devil as more capable than it actually is when left to auto control itself. For this reason, we ran a second set of auto tests with the fan configured to follow the curve that's actually used in other applications like games or 3D Mark, and then we allowed the other auto curve to run on its own. So the gaming curve will better represent the scaling performance versus other cards in terms of establishing a hierarchy. Starting with auto GPU temperatures, this allows us to see how the device performs when left to use its automatically configured VBIOS tables for both FurMark and gaming. The Red Devil at 220 watts with its FurMark profile is now among the chart toppers, ranking alongside the Taichi X at 190 watts and XFX Thick Ultra at 190 watts. The Thick managed this performance by blasting fan speeds faster than most others, whereas the Taichi X was simply running a lower power target than most others when compared to its cooler size and effectiveness. The Red Devil ends up at its 80-degree junction temperature with a 1750 RPM fan speed, which is very close to our 40 dBA measurement. That said, this isn't exactly how the fan behaves in gaming, despite how it behaves in FurMark. For gaming, it'll spin at about 1340 RPM in our test environment with the OC VBIOS set, or about 1000 RPM for the silent VBIOS. This chart tells us that Powercolor has configured a fan curve that's in the middle when set to run in FurMark. When the Thick is running closer to 44 to 46 dBA, depending on the scenario, the Red Devil sits around 40, and a lot of these other cards fall between 37, 38, 39 dBA for the Mark. The difference is that the others, shown here, would also stack up the same in 3D Mark or a game, whereas the Red Devil would drop dramatically in its rank. If we highlight the 180 watt actual auto ranking, the Red Devil now ends up last at 94 degrees junction and 76 edge, next to the Thick with its terrible ultra-high VBIOS that you can download from their site, but you shouldn't. That doesn't mean the cooler is bad for the Powercolor Red Devil, it just means that the fan isn't aggressive enough with silent mode. With the 220 watt actual auto rank, we're near the Gigabyte Gaming OC and Nitro Plus, down around 90 degrees. That's a big drop from the FurMark auto setting and is more of where you should expect the card for regular use. Again, all this really means is that the auto results could be improved upon by manually setting a fan curve. Powercolor's cooler is fine when normalized, but doesn't run aggressively enough, we think, under gaming conditions. GDDR6 thermals are up now, this time with auto settings. The Red Devil with its FurMark auto settings ends up topping the chart, running its fans at 40 dBA and outperforming the louder Thick without any issues at all, despite the higher power consumption. The Nitro Plus is also outperformed here, but runs a quieter fan speed, hence the need to noise normalize as we did earlier. The FurMark Auto 180 watt test had us down near the Gaming X and Evoke with auto settings, pre-mod. As for applying the fan speeds used in games, the Red Devil ends up near the MSI Gaming X at 210 watts, although slightly advantaged. It's middle of the pack otherwise, and not particularly strong in its auto configuration. We'll get the RPM plots for 3D Mark on the screen now, representing performance for gaming workloads. Plotting fan RPM and GPU edge temperature first, the OCV BIOS tries to sustain a GPU edge temperature of about 72 degrees Celsius, which pushes an RPM of about 1300 to 1350 for the fan. There's a hard fall off at the beginning of the test, from about 1700 RPM down to this resting speed. Looking next at frequency response, we can see that the OCV BIOS averages about 1950 MHz during the course of the 3D Mark workload. The silent VBIOS is able to carry its lower fan RPM in part thanks to the 1830 MHz average frequency, a significant reduction versus the OC stock VBIOS that it's set to. Here's a super zoomed in look at some other cards. We can't fit them all, obviously, but it'll give you a good idea of the upper and lower limits. The Taichi X and its 230 watt VBIOS still hold the claim of being the highest out-of-box frequency in the 20-20 MHz range and above everything else. MSI's Gaming X is next, then the Red Devil, then the Thick, and then the reference card. The average FPS delta between reference and something like the Red Devil would be about 2 to 2.2% on average for reference. So there's, for reference meaning not the reference card, but for point of reference. So there's not a big performance range here. Highest frequency isn't a metric by which we judge value when the deltas are so low, especially when considering that it can all be equalized in software. Also, this scale is 1850 to 2040 MHz, so everything is blown out to get a better view. It'd all be on top of each other if we left it normal scale. Here's a plot of the noise levels at a given RPM. The curve isn't as linear as some others we've seen and tops out higher, giving some additional headroom at the high end for cooling if you really need it. That said, at over 60 dBA, not many people will want to venture this high in RPM to begin with. It's also just genuinely not necessary, as the card remains well within operating bounds when pegged to 40 dBA. The only use would be on-air heavy overclocks and power play table mods for competitive overclocking, but you'd be better off with water cooling the card for that anyway. So that's it for the Powercolor Red Devil 5700 XT. They also have other cards. There might be a Red Dragon or some other cheaper model that we don't have any immediate plans to look at. Interest is dying down for the 5700 XT series. We know that many of you, those who probably are not watching, are sick of these. But for those who've really been trying to decide on a card, hopefully this helps you out, especially with holiday season coming up. A lot of people are going to be back referencing this stuff. So anyway, the card is simply fine. At first, we weren't really sure what all the hype was about when we looked at the numbers, but then you kind of look at the context. And the Powercolor Red Devil was among the first cards to be sent out for review. We didn't get one, so that's why we have sort of the advantage of now looking back at everything else, like the Nitro, the Gaming X, even the Thick, just for perspective, I guess, at the worst end of things. And so we've got that benefit of now reviewing it much later than most other people, looking back and seeing, okay, so it looked really good when it launched before other cards came out, like the Nitro. But how does it really compare? And how it really compares is it's simply fine. You're at a point with these high-end 5700 XTs, the ones that are executed well, that it just doesn't matter that much which one you bought. You're basically, let's say between a Nitro and this card, you're basically choosing based on things like sizing, the slight differences there are, and that's mostly it. Maybe things like, I don't know, are they even different PCBs? Not really. Yes. Yeah, slightly. Yeah, they're different enough. Okay, so when I say PCBs, I don't mean VRM. VRM is different. But what I really meant was the layout. So the Nitro would be easier to stick an LN2 pot on. How many people care about that? And if you really care about it, you could just remove these capacitors and relocate them elsewhere anyway, if you're that kind of person. So that's really one of the main factors. And once you're down to that level of difference, for pretty much everybody else, more than 99% of buyers, it doesn't matter all that much. The Nitro, we can break it down into this. The Nitro and the Red Devil cards are the two primary considerations we have at this price point. So we've narrowed it down to two for you. At that point, the Gaming X is fine. It's one of those where if you really like how it looks, or it's an availability issue, that one's kind of fine as well. Nothing special. It does the job. We really wish it had dual V BIOS, and personally, just me speaking here, I would choose something else because it doesn't have that, but that's the main differentiator. So between the Nitro and the Red Devil, we end up looking at things like auto. If you're using it auto, you don't want to do a custom fan curve, and no one blames you because AMD's fan configuration is total garbage right now, as we explained in the XFX Thick review. Some of it XFX's fault, some of it not. If you're using it auto, the Nitro has a lot of ground it really can gain there. Sapphire should probably put out another BIOS version with a slightly more aggressive fan curve, but it's a really good cooler. It just doesn't really ramp aggressively enough for our taste. When auto, it should probably be a little bit louder. Couple dust, maybe 2 dBA louder would do it a lot of good. Otherwise, there's not a lot of difference, so yeah, that's going to be it. Our firm conclusion is Nitro or Red Devil are both fine. Pick the one you like the most in terms of looks and availability and price, but otherwise, you don't really need to feel bad about buying either one. The Nitro Plus has a technical victory in GPU thermals in our testing. The Red Devil has some technical victories. The Nitro Plus has better LN2, this is the Red Devil. The Nitro Plus has better LN2 pot fitment capabilities, but that matters for almost no one. So that's it. Like I said, we weren't sure about what all the hype was about until we kind of remembered the context of, oh, well, yeah, this came out really early and a lot of the reviewers didn't have everything yet. So genuinely, if we reviewed this before looking at the Nitro, then our choice would be buy the Red Devil. But with some competition in the field, it's narrowed to two, and then you can pick. So that's it. Thank you for watching. Still waiting for the free sandwich. We've reviewed enough of these now. You have a punch card and everything. We've gotten it punched every time we buy and review one of these or receive one and review it. Still haven't gotten my damn sandwich, so I'm quite disappointed. If you'd like to help us pay for food so that we don't die, you can go to store.gamersnexus.net and pick up something like a mod mat or a GN shirt like this one, a GPU artifacting shirt. And you can also go to patreon.com/gamersnexus. Thank you for watching. We'll see you all next time.